Ave omnibus cui spectacula Metatron sequentur, ego Metatron sum. Today I would like to talk about Roman military training. As we know, the Romans used a whole variety of strategies and tactics in order to overcome the enemy forces. But of course, heavy infantry has a pivotal role in Roman battlefield tactics. Now, infantry as the main body during Roman warfare has been a constant throughout the entire Roman era, with the only exception during the Second Punic War, because as we know, the cavalry at that time had a crucial role. However, after the meticulous organization of the empire, the Romans went back to heavy infantry as the main body during battles. Now, there are 5 possible stances we need to keep in mind as we consider the Romans having to impact the enemy. Of course, standard Roman tactics called for a Roman to throw his pilum at the enemy, and that was to cause and have casualties, to render the enemy shields useless during battle, but also to discourage charge. Now, if that wasn't enough, Roman soldier needed to be prepared to face the opponent in hand-to-hand combat. Now, there are 5 stances we need to keep in mind. 2 have to do with the scutum, 3 have to do with the gladius. Holding the scutum up to the shoulder plates is the standard position of the scutum. Now, the second position of the scutum would be to put it on the ground and use your whole body to resist the impact of the enemy. Now, while the scutum is on the ground, you cannot move. So this is just a defensive position. Now, as the scutum is up, it can be used also to form the studo, which was the formation used by the Romans to resist heavy enemy fire, like missiles, arrows and darts. We have 3 possible stances, well, generally speaking, of course. This will be the first one. The gladius is ready to strike the enemy. The second is with the gladius all the way back in order to make sure the enemy cannot control the blade and then attack. And the third one would be with the gladius on top of your scutum. Now, the Roman trained with wooden gladius, which had quite twice the weight of a normal battle gladius, and they used scutum, which had twice the weight of a battlefield scutum. So you can imagine that they would develop such a muscular size and strength as to be very, very quick in combat. So that was the first thing that they did. Secondly, they worked on precision. Now, what they did, they most likely used poles, wooden poles, which I use myself when I train, and I try to use very thin poles, and they are much better than trees. The reason is that the overall surface that you need to attack, particularly with your thrusts, is very small if you use a pole, a wooden pole, and that increases your precision. So the idea is taking your shield and practicing a thrust, thrust up, thrust down, thrust in the middle, thrust up, thrust down. Now, I prefer doing all my training in armor because it helps me feel the armor and get used to the idea of having this weight slowing me down. Romans also used slashes. Most of the times they wouldn't really use these during formations and tight formations, but they would have practiced them as well. You can even alternate rows of thrusts and slashes. The dummy weapons that were used, the ones that we were talking about, being twice as heavy as the original weapons, were at first employed against heavy wooden stakes, as I have mentioned, about 6 foot high, rather than against fellow soldiers. Against these wooden stakes, the soldier trained the various moves, strikes and counter-strikes with a sword.
Only once the recruits was deemed able enough in fighting against the stakes were they assigned in pairs to train in individual combat. This more advanced stage of combat training was called armatura, an expression which first was used in the gladiatorial schools, which proves that some of the methods used in training soldiers was indeed borrowed from the training techniques of gladiators. The weapons used in armatura were, though, still of wood of the same or similar weight as the original service weapons. Weapon training was considered incredibly important, crucial part of military training. Weapon instructors generally received double rations, whereas soldiers who didn't achieve adequate standards received inferior rations, until they had proven, in the presence of a high-ranking officer, that they had attained the demand standards. Now, when we talk about inferior rations, of course, we're talking about food. We know specifically, thanks to Vegetius, Roman writer, that the normal rations of wheat were substituted with barley, which was something that was done also to punish soldiers and legionaries for other shortcomings. A similar situation happened with the pilum, the javelin. The pilum used for practice was once again twice the weight of a regular weapon, and it was thrown against wooden stakes, again to increase precision. So they used the same stakes that they had been using with the gladius as targets. Again, according to Vegetius, or Vegetius if you want to use ecclesiastical pronunciation for his name, weapon training was so important that occasionally they also built roofed riding schools and drill halls so that these training sessions could continue also throughout winter. Ultimately, a very important thing was marching and physical training. Again, the historian Vegetius tells us that Roman army and its soldiers could march quickly and at speed. The reason being that an army which would be split up because of soldiers struggling to keep up the march speed would be vulnerable to attack. Hence, right from the beginning, the Roman soldier was trained to march in line and to keep the army as compact as possible, including while on the move. During summer months, the soldiers were to be marched 20 Roman miles, which is basically 18.4 modern miles, which is around 30 kilometers, in 5 hours. As far as physical exercise was concerned, Vegetius mentions running, long and high jump, and carrying heavy packs. During summer, swimming was also part of training, and that would happen if the camp was near the sea, lake, or river.